Thank you very much. Really appreciate that, guys. Make yourselves comfortable. I feel a little bit like Hannah and Maisie and Zara and Eleanor may have just stolen my talk, said it better, and said it quicker. She certainly nicked my voice, but there we go. And Zara's definition of well-being was great. You can see how it compares to the one I'll give in a moment. It's hard to read things in magazines or newspapers or to watch things on television without coming across references to well-being at the moment. It's not a new thing. It's been something that's been growing in interest probably over the last decade. But it feels like it's COVID that's put it into context. Because people are asking all sorts of questions along the lines of kind of how do we get over this last year? How do we get some sort of equilibrium and balance back into our lives? How do we start to live our lives again? And COVID has challenged our well-being in so many different ways too. There's the obvious physical threat to our well-being. Too many people have died. Too many people are still living with the effects of COVID, long COVID, and unable to kind of resume life as normal. Our mental health has been under pressure in ways that probably we've never experienced before. For many, there are financial pressures that have come through COVID, whether it's being furloughed or made redundant, having less income, not being able to meet bills, wondering where their money will come to put food on the table. And then, of course, relationships have been massively impacted. For some of us, perhaps we live with someone and that's helped. But for most of us, we've been starved of relationship, starved of the opportunity to spend time with other people, often the people that we are closest to as well. It feels like every area of our lives has been affected. And I thought Mike was brilliant last week. I felt like he kind of spoke what I was feeling, and I suspect I wasn't alone in that. There's this sense that we're coming out of the pandemic, and this feeling that it doesn't automatically reset life or make everything all right again. And that's hard because I think our expectation is that we can go back to normal or we can live again. And yet we find ourselves struggling with things that we didn't expect. Things that we think we should enjoy, just going to the shops, feel daunting, threatening, frightening even. Even perhaps coming to church may feel the same for you at this time. Just reconnecting with people can raise anxiety and feel like a huge challenge. So all these things that feel like they ought to be good can also unsettle us too. It's a challenge. So I think there's a growing awareness that we can't take recovery from COVID and from this pandemic for granted. Just to assume that everything will go back to normal doesn't really kind of work. There's a sense that we need to be intentional in addressing the impact of this past year. That doesn't mean to be negative. That's not about somehow holding us back from living life again. Perhaps actually it can be a good thing. Perhaps it can give us an opportunity to reset our lives, look at what's important in them, what is working, and also look at what isn't working and find ways to make it work. Kind of look at our lives properly and grow through it rather than just react to it. It's a chance to build on what's good and to address the areas of life where we struggle. And I suspect we all have areas of our lives where we're struggling. at this time. Probably some of us find it easier to acknowledge than others. Others perhaps are more tempted to kind of push it all down and to kind of make like it's all right. But the reality of those struggles, I think, are there for many, many of us. And so to help address those areas, we've been running this Wellbeing journey. It's a course on Tuesday evenings. It looks at our well-being, but it feels like that's not enough. That actually as a whole church family, we need to look at these issues and perhaps also look at them from a slightly different perspective to the one that the course gives us. And so that's why we're focusing on well-being on Sunday mornings too. And we're also, as you saw, going to be focusing on it with our young people. And we thought we'd actually share those videos in our worship, but they will also be up separately so young people can access them without having to come into the main service online to do it, if you know what I mean. I hope that means that actually that will kind of facilitate conversations around the meal table at home, talking about these issues. One of the things that's really struck me doing the Wellbeing course on a Tuesday evening is kind of thinking about stuff is one thing, kind of learning about stuff or principles is another, but actually I think the real power of making a difference is sharing this journey with other people. There is a danger, and I know I've done it on Tuesday evenings, that because one of the areas of well-being we think about is physical, that I will end up harking back all the time to the fact that I'm running, which is something I've never done in my life. But I know that one of the reasons why I've kept this going is that I've not been doing it on my own, that Carol and I have done it together. And there's something in that, when one of us feels like flagging and the other one keeps them going. Just that I've still flagged a bit this week and Carol's kept on going, never mind. But actually that's a great picture of actually how we move forward in our lives. Actually we need relationship and people to share this with, people to talk these things out with and through. And so we would really want to encourage, in a way, a conversation to be taking place. So we've had Zara's definition of well-being. This one is from the Oxford English Dictionary. It says that well-being is the state of being comfortable, healthy, or happy. And then the website I've pulled it from said, however, it's important to realise that well-being is a much broader concept than moment-to-moment happiness. While it includes happiness, it includes other things, such as how satisfied people are in their lives as a whole, their sense of purpose, how in control they feel. Kind of their economics affect this too. Well-being can be understood as how people feel and how they function, both on a personal and a social level, how they evaluate their lives as a whole. And one of the things about the last year, it's caused us to reevaluate our lives. And at times, the last year, it's felt like it's shaken and damaged our lives. This is all about reinvesting in our lives. And I don't think well-being is a new idea or even a knee-jerk reaction to the pandemic. Actually, I think it's at the heart of our faith as Christians. The passage that Joe read for us is one of the most famous ones in the New Testament. It's the one in which Jesus declares himself to be the good shepherd. He says, I am the good shepherd. I lay down my life for the sheep. And throughout John's Gospel, you will find a variety of times when Jesus makes the most amazing claims. They're described as the I am sayings of Jesus. I am the bread of life. I'm the one that sustains you. That speaks into our finances, into what we need to live. I am the light of the world. That speaks into this creative world that we have stewardship over. This is God's world. Without it, Without Jesus, there'd be no life in it. I am the gate. That was also in our reading today. Kind of Jesus is saying, I'm the source of salvation. It's in putting your trust in me. It's in through me that you enter into life. I am the good shepherd. I'm the one that cares enough for my sheep, that loves them enough to lay down my life for them. I am the resurrection and the life. Kind of this death-shaken world in which we live in is a world that still has hope because Jesus is the resurrection and the life. I'm the true vine, the one that sustains life in you. I'm the way, the truth, and the life. It kind of feels like Jesus' claims speak into every area of our lives. And in the middle of this passage, he says that he's come to give us life, and to give us life in all of its fullness. He says the thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. I've come that you might have life and have it to the full. And that's also the verse that Hannah quoted in the youth video. It, for me, seems to be at the heart of what well-being is all about. Why essentially well-being and our faith go hand in hand. Because the purpose of Jesus was to bring life and to give us the best possible life. It's easy to kind of separate our lives out into compartments. One of the things I really like about this well-being course we've been doing on Tuesday evenings is that it looks at different areas of our life, but it sees our lives as a whole and how these actually interact with each other. If we're struggling with our finances, then we will have increased anxiety. Actually, sometimes it can work the other way around, can't it? Actually, if we're struggling for anxiety, we can look for an escape for anxiety and we can be unwise over our finances. Or we can be unwise about how we look after our bodies. We can kind of eat for comfort. You know, what affects one part of our lives affects other parts of our lives. If we have increased anxiety, it will impact our relationships. I know when I'm stressed, the person that feels my stress the most is Carol, because I snap and I'm uncomfortable to be around. If one persists in that, one damages our relationships. If our relationships aren't working, then our anxieties, the whole lot interconnects. And the same's true of our faith. It's easy to see faith as a separate thing, something that relates to Sunday or to church, or something that might give us some sort of sense of personal comfort. And if we see it like that, we will kind of reduce what Jesus is saying here to just being concerned with just one small aspect of our lives. Jesus says, I've come that you might have life. Yes, spiritual life. He's come to restore our relationship with God. He's come to deal with the sin that separates us from God. But he's also come to restore our relationships. Every time we look at the cross, we're reminded of that. Because sin separates. It separates us from God, but also the practical outworking of sin is it damages our relationships and it separates us from others too. Jesus comes to restore relationship with God, but he also, through that, comes to restore relationship between each other. He's concerned with every aspect of our lives. He wants us to have life in all of its fullness, in every area of our lives, to flourish in every way. He's concerned with our minds, how we think about ourselves, how we see ourselves. He wants us to see ourselves as God sees us, created in his image, every one of us precious and loved. He's interested in our bodies. They're temples of the Holy Spirit. They are his gift to us. He's concerned with our finances. And it's a tragedy in church if we only ever talk about finance in terms of giving to church. God's concerned that we flourish financially and that we have kind of structures in place in our lives that enable us to do that. He's concerned about our emotions, our mental well-beings, our relationships. I've talked about that already. Ultimately, Jesus is also concerned about the purpose for our lives, why we live, the meaning that our lives have. That's the gospel. It's meant to transform every part of life. Well-being and the gospel go hand in hand. Over Easter, we've been talking about Jesus' encounters with his disciples. A number of times we've mentioned how he would often say, "Peace be with you," in each of those resurrection encounters. And one of the things that we noted is that that is a word that encompasses every aspect of life. Peace isn't just peace of mind or freedom from war and conflict or peace with God. It's about living in God's peace, the all-encompassing blessing of God being worked out in every area of our lives. That's what God wants for us. And we want to spend time this term thinking about how we can live that out in our lives. This passage has this incredible contrast. Better word. There's Jesus that comes to bring life. Life in all its fullness. But he also talks about the thief that comes only to steal, to kill, and to destroy. And it feels like for so many, this last year has been visited by the thief. It feels, I think for some young people, it feels like a year of their life has been stolen from them. Opportunities have been stolen from them. For other of us, it may feel like our futures have been stolen from us. I've spoken to people that are newly retired, and it's like they've been put in prison for a year because they've not been able to see people or to do things, and they've given up the job that would have given them purpose. So much about COVID is that it acts like a thief. It comes to steal, to kill, and to destroy. And some of us will be living with the consequences of that now. We will feel impoverished in so many areas of our lives. And you need to hear Jesus' words. That's what the thief comes to do. He comes to bring life. To bring life in all of its fullness. So as we come into land, where in your life do you need restoration? Where in your life has stuff been stolen away from you? And I just want us to be quiet now for you to reflect on that. And as with so many of these things, I suspect it was the first thought that came into your mind when I said that. But just take a moment to reflect. Perhaps reflect on different areas of your life, your finances, your relationships, your emotional life, kind of how you see yourself and your life, your purpose in life. Just take a moment to glance over your life and just to acknowledge where you are, where the fuel gauge is on empty. And I want to encourage you to come to Jesus, the Lord of all life. The one who promises to give you life. Life in all of its fullness. That's his purpose for you. And I just want to encourage you to acknowledge to him where you feel empty. Not as a quick fix, but just as a starting point, to ask him to come and to begin his work of restoration, to fill you afresh in that area of your life. Lord, many of us feel broken and tired. Kind of life is meant to be beginning, but actually we feel like we're at the end of our resources. It feels like so much of what's good has been stolen from our lives. We're struggling financially. We're at the end of our resources emotionally and mentally. The relationships that have sustained us are strained or distant. Kind of we wonder what the purpose for our lives is. We feel a long way away from your fullness. If we come in faith, we dare to believe that you will keep your word, that you will offer us life in all of its fullness. And I want to encourage you just to receive that life now, just to welcome it, to welcome his presence, his spirit. Lord, restore us again. And I want, as I close now, just to encourage you to do one thing practical. To talk to someone about your wellness. Talk to someone about how you feel about life. Don't expect them to have the answers. Just ask them to be willing to listen. Amen. And we're going to continue with our